Hey, everybody. My name is Samantha Adams. I would like to welcome you to our Counterpoise podcast. I am joined here with my other two podcast co-hosts. Guys, you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Yes, I am Everett Stevenson.
Hello, everybody. My name is Malik Foster, another co-host for Counterpoise Podcast, and today we have a good topic for you guys. Today, we're going to be talking about the sentencing of Payton Gendron. So he's the person responsible for murdering 10 people in a supermarket, Top Friendlies in Buffalo, New York. He's getting life without the possibility of parole. That's what was handed down to him. It was quite sentencing. A person even tried to charge at him doing it. He said he apologized for murdering those people. He was wrong. They were black. They were innocent people, etc. So that's just a little intro to the situation. We wanted to kind of get into some of the sentencing and how this case a little differs from some of the other cases that we've seen where Black people have been murdered in the past. Does anybody want to add to a little bit of the background?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think it's funny that you had mentioned the whole him being remorseful. But I mean, prior to, I know this is one of the individuals who left a manifesto of his crimes with which was roughly around somewhere around 80 pages of him kind of leaving rhetoric, kind of speaking towards this hatred for not only just blacks but also Jewish people as well. I think there's some anti-Semitic statements in there. And I believe also some of the things that he said was one of his one of his reasonings behind it was the fact that he felt like the white population was dwindling, and he thought that his actions taken on that day would somewhat counter or offset some of the rapid decline of this nation, of the Aryan nation, I guess. So that's some of the background in regarding to his thought process and maybe some of his reasonings behind it. And so I just wanted to get context to that. You're still on mute, Sam.
My bad. There were a couple other things I wanted to add. One of the things I think it's important, I think, Malik, you said this, that he pled guilty. I think that's important. He wasn't found guilty. He pled guilty to shooting. I think it was 10 murders and 3 aggravated assaults. Hold on, we're just trying to double check. 10 counts of first degree murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and weapons possession charges. And he was also charged with the mass shooting at the top. Now, what happened at the Tops Friendly Markets back in May 2022. The reason why I find that interesting is because a lot of times in these mass shootings, you're not seeing any of the assailants or murderers take responsibility. You're not seeing them plead. Oftentimes they go ahead and they go to trial, they lose, and then they get whatever sentence they get. So I think that that's important. The reason why I think that that's important is because had he gone to trial, the likelihood that his sentence would have been more harsh. And the reason I use air quotes is because it's not the only thing more harsh than life imprisonment is the death penalty. And I'm not 100% sure if Buffalo has a death penalty. And so the fact that he took responsibility, it says something. I don't know what it says, but I guess it just shows that he's willing to take ownership for what he did. He appeared to be remorseful because they also claim that while he was apologizing to the families and saying that he still can't believe that he did it and now he feels bad and all that stuff, he cried. And so, I mean, it's kind of hard to have empathy for somebody who murdered 10 people who went to the grocery. Who shot all those people, 10 of which perished, all because they wanted to go buy some groceries on a random day. And so, with that being said, that goes into like what Malik was talking about, where one family member was literally standing there giving her victim impact statement, which typically happens at sentencing. And that's where a family member of a victim gets up and they talk about how the loss of that person has affected them since they've been gone. And while that happened, another person, I think it was somebody's father or something or son, he got up, moved that lady out the way and charged the shooter. And he charged him because I think he was willing to beat the brakes off of him. He didn't care if he was going to catch that misdemeanor for the sake of feeling better as best he could after losing his family. So, I think that it's also important to highlight that, right? Because you do see that sometimes where somebody murders or rapes or, does some heinous act against another person. And then at sentencing, a family member of that alleged victim, like, tries to attack the defendant. And so, because they're so filled with and overcome with emotions. And so I did wanted to go ahead and make sure I pointed that out as well.
Yeah, and I think too, I think the fact that, again, this didn't go to trial and therefore there wasn't a lot of stuff that was being drawn out as far as witnesses and things of that nature. And I think that plays a role in it because it affects the time frame in which, families have in order to continue to heal. While I understand that there is no exact time that's going to be in place where a family member can officially, I don't think there's ever going to be a time that you're going to be over that loss. I do think that within more time, though, you are able to maybe better control your emotions associated with it. And again, with the expediency of the way that the sentencing happened, I believe like this case might have taken place roughly around maybe like 10 months ago or something like that. This is when this occurred. So while it hasn't necessarily even been a whole year yet, there has been a few months, and again, tempers can still be very high, with family members and that loss of a family member like that. So I just wanted to kind of bring that into play as well as the timing of how long from when the incident happened to when the actual sentencing was taking place, and how that could also affect the state of mind of the family and the victims of the family, the victims' families and their thought process when going before the courts and getting a chance to kind of give their speech to the defendant.
Yeah, his life is also lost too, right? Because now he's got to be in prison and rot for the rest of his life. CNN, in their article, they quoted something that the judge said when she handed down her sentence. And I think that I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's a short couple little sentences. But I want to read it is because I think what she says is kind of impactful and important, but I don't know what type of effect it will have on future cases. But I do think that it's important and relevant. It says, "There's no place for you or your ignorant, hateful, and evil ideologies in a civilized society." She said that there can be no mercy for you, no understanding, no second chances. The damage you have caused is too great, and the people you have hurt are too valuable to this community. You will never see the light of day as a free man ever again. Like, you only hear about statements that scathing, like on TV. That is scathing. That tells me the judge was not happy.
Well, Oh, go ahead.
To even put it into those words, I think that it's important because she's definitely paying attention and acknowledging the fact that the impact of his behavior and actions the type of impact that it had, not just on these families, but as the Black community as a whole as well. And that's the reason why I find it interesting, because oftentimes, you know, you'll hear judges talk about, you know, their behavior and how it affects the community. But you don't often hear them talk about how you'll never see the light of day. Like, you don't hear that type of language. And when you do, you don't often hear it towards white people, unless you're talking about like some sort of a serial killer, which essentially he is, right? Because mass shooters are, in fact, serial killers because they kill multiple people. It just happens at once, right? And so, like, you do hear that, but I just think that it's interesting to hear it in this circumstance. I guess for me personally, I didn't expect it to be that emotional of a sentencing for the judge.
Yeah, I wanted to add in the article that you eloquently outlined that the guy who lunged at the murderer here, Gendron, he will not be charged with anything. They said they don't want to add to the tragedy. So if it wasn't so tragic, they would have charged him. I don't know. So that's interesting.
Because technically, what he did was commit assault, right?
Yeah, yeah, he did. But you know, there's also the human element to this that I think sometimes that we miss, right? These situations, it's like, you know, when these things happen, especially to Black people, it's always about, oh, the law, objectivity, but we never think about, you know, the human aspect, the human element. Sometimes we just always want to go by the book and letter of the law, and which the law isn't always correct. I mean, you know, sometimes the law is wrong and it needs to be changed and altered. Like we could, especially throughout, you know, the history of the United States, their laws have always, a lot of laws have been wrong and incorrect and had to been changed and modified. So the justice system isn't any different. The rules and regulations that rule over the justice system do need to be modified, in my opinion. But yeah, so this is a very interesting case here. I wanted to bring up another aspect of it. You know, how does this situation differ from other situations like the Derek Chauvin, George Floyd incidents, all these other incidents where, you know, Black people were murdered, but the murderers necessarily, if they did get convicted, they did get maybe the sentencing that, you know, society would deem justifiable for the murderer's actions. So I just wanted to kind of propose that. Why do y'all think this case might be potentially different? Is this a trend of something new? If Black people are murdered in mass, this is the type of sentencing we can expect and justice we could expect? Or is this just a specific situation where Everett had outlined, oh, he had a manifesto, he had that ideology of hate, so, you know, they couldn't do anything but make this ruling because it was clear and obvious and without a doubt?
I would like to believe that hopefully this will be one of the things that you see as a trend that's holding people accountable for their actions, in particular heinous actions that involve, you know, stereotyping particular individuals and groups. I also think that this is another opportunity for Congress to take a stand of action. I think we recently heard the vice president, we heard the vice president kind of endorse the George Floyd bill being brought before Congress and voted on again. We've seen it happen after one of the we saw the Asian hate bill kind of get passed due to some of the horrendous actions that was taken against their community. So I do think that there should be something on the books that kind of speak a little bit stronger towards actions and towards individuals who take these negative actions towards African Americans. I also think that, like you said, Malik, if there's those overwhelming evidence of bigotry and things of that nature based on people in their past, that definitely should help. But I also feel like if we could look from the preponderance of evidence and of, the type of individuals that they are targeting when they're shooting and killing. If I'm not mistaken, in this situation, this is one of the guys who let someone go because they were white at the time when he was in that shoot or when he was shooting. So I definitely can see that, this could be something that hopefully Congress brings before, so we don't have to worry about the courts necessarily having to do it on their own, because we do know when there's been discretion that's been allowed, unfortunately, that hasn't always been favorable for us or our individuals who are victims to crimes that are based upon race based. So I would like to see something be done. I would hope that the courts would start to take those changes. But in the event that they aren't, I would ask that we get our legislators to be able to put something on the books to enforce this type of justice for these injustices.
I think, Malik, to answer your question, some of the differences are a lot of those people that you named, those victims, they were killed by the police. So, you have a whole nother layer of qualified immunity attached to that. And so when I look at, if I want to compare it to somebody like Rashad Brooks, the difference is that police officer who killed him is back working. He's back working now, right? But Derek Chauvin, he is in jail. I don't know what's going on with those other 3 police in the George Floyd case. The police with Breonna Taylor, like everybody's not locked up and put away forever, but some people get put away, right? Ahmaud Arbery is probably, he's a close example, but we all saw what happened with that, right? Those men went to trial and got 1 million years. And that's typically what happens. They'll get a whole lot of years and knowing that they're not going to survive their sentence. So it's basically a life sentence. Like if you're 70 years old and you get a 50-year sentence, chances are you're about to die in prison. You know what I'm saying? So I think that it's important to recognize that. I think that's the difference. Another difference is whether or not you go to trial and plead. That's the reason why I mentioned that, because typically what happens is if you go to trial, whatever sentence you get, often, just depending on how the trial goes, is more harsh than it would have been had you pled. So in this case, he got a life sentence for 10 murders, 3 aggravated assaults, and weapons charges. So he probably just got the 1 life sentence. Whereas typically what they'll do...
Also, I think a domestic terrorism charge too in there. So
I'm pretty sure there was a hate crime aspect attached to all of them.
Yeah.
So as opposed to getting 10 life sentences plus however many years for all these other charges, they just wrapped it all up into one, did a global resolution, because each murder is well, I don't know. Depends on how they do it in New York. So because
but also, Sam, I was going to say...
Let me finish what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Sometimes what they'll do is they'll separate each murder as a different case. Sometimes what they'll do is put them all together. But either way, what I think that they did was some sort of a global type of plea to cover everybody and all of the crimes that he was charged with. In this case, it was probably just one case with multiple counts, because each murder of each person, it all happened within the same transaction or occurrence. That's a legal term. And so, meaning all at the same time, on the same day, in the same event. And so with that being said, I think that that's the reason why they were able to give that type of a sentence offer for him to go ahead and accept, because God only knows what would have came out as it relates more to the manifesto and all that other stuff, whether he had other plans, things like that. So that's the other thing you always want to think about when somebody takes a plea, or if they're just like, I don't want to have a trial, I'm done with it. Yep, I did it. That's that, because that also happens too. But what were you going to say, Malik?
I was gonna say, yeah, you make a good point with the law enforcement. Obviously, that's a big thing. But I was gonna say there is cases of civilians as well, like non-law enforcement members getting off. Like they always spin it in a way, especially self-defense. There's always some sort of narrative So it's not just that distinction alone. I would say I was leaning towards, does it, do you guys think it has to be like the perfect storm, like where it has to be multiple black people, then it has to be just like this man or woman have to have a manifesto. It like this has to be so blatant, anybody can see it from miles away. That's what I was kind of trying to get at. That what
Are
you're
you
saying.
ask, are you asking, do we think, are you talking about the hate crime aspect of it?
Yeah, the hate crime, like, does it, like, for in order for the justifiable sentencing, what the community would deem a justifiable sentencing, do you think it has to be clear and obvious? The
Yeah.
hate crime has to be there. Everything has to be a perfect storm. Sort of in this case, like it was
I
kind of clear.
Because I think that, like, okay, so all three of us are lawyers. We all know this, but our viewers may not necessarily know this. Whenever you have elements to a crime, I mean, whenever you have a crime, there are elements. It means each crime has multiple parts, right? And each one must be met in order for somebody to have been deemed guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in criminal law, right? So when you have something like a hate crime, the hate crime itself is not its own charge, it's an enhancement. So if they can show with reasonable doubt, I believe reasonable doubt might be the standard on the enhancement, that, okay, he shot these people and he shot these people because they were black or because they were Jewish or because they were Muslim or because they were gay, whatever the reason is, the purpose for the targeting of that particular group, you have to be able to show it. If he's out there saying, like, if this is the right case, and this is really sad that so many people are getting shot for no reason, that like all of these mass shootings are starting to run together with one another. But as it relates to this case, if it was a situation where he was like, oh, I'm about to shoot this guy, oh no, now you're white, you can go, but I'm gonna shoot everybody black, that's kind of clear, right? Whereas if you're just in there and you're shooting and a couple white people get hit, but everybody you kill is black, that might be a little bit more dicey if there's no manifesto that says, hey, I want to kill all the black people. You see what I'm saying? I do think there has to be.
Like, so you think in that distinction it would get separate charges?
I
Like,
don't think it'll be separate charges. I think the
I mean,
sentence.
a lesser sentencing. Sorry.
Yeah, because when you have that enhancement, typically the sentence can be higher. Let me give you a different example, right? Battery family violence. Battery family violence in every state, it may be slightly different as to how it is, how sentencing is executed. But typically, battery family violence, the first one in most states, because I believe the federal law requires it, because is anything that holds a sentence of 12 months or less, right? And so a first battery family violence, or which is also known as a domestic violence charge, typically it's a 12-month, like in the state of Georgia, it's 12 months in jail and up to $1,000 fine for any misdemeanor, unless that misdemeanor is a high crime or is aggravated or a high crime, right? And so, and I think I said that term wrong, but an aggravated misdemeanor would be a family violence. So you can have a battery where, like, let's say you have two people that don't know each other, or maybe they do know each other, but they never lived together. They don't have this kind of relationship, and they get into a fight, or maybe it's a bar fight. But then you have two roommates, or maybe a boyfriend and a girlfriend, husband and wife, brother and a sister, something like that. They get into a fight. That makes a bit family violence. And so that fine, even though 12 months stays at a maximum for a misdemeanor, that fine can be increased from $1,000, which is the where it stops for your typical misdemeanor. But when it's a high and aggravated crime, that enhancement can make it go up to $5,000. And so, those enhancements increase things. Or let's say somebody is gang affiliated. You can have somebody engage in a particular crime or whatever, but the thing about it is, once that gang affiliation might get attached to it, that can aggravate the crime, making the sentence more harsh. So that's typically how that works.
Okay, so I guess in layman's terms, is what you're saying. There is a distinction that would possibly lessen the sentencing for the
Not
for
it's not less than the sentencing, it's that it would, if that makes any sense. Because the sentence is what it is, right? Let's say you have a mandatory minimum on a sentence. If that mandatory minimum is whatever, let's say it's a year and $1,000. Let's say, no, let's use a felony. Let's say it's 5 years and a $25,000 fine. Let's say that's a mandatory minimum for whatever the crime is, right? If there's an enhancement attached, that enhancement can add years or money or both to the mandatory minimum. So remember, with mandatory minimum means this is the bottom, this is the floor. It can go up. So if you're looking at a murder charge, somebody may have to let's say a mandatory minimum on a murder might be 25 years to life. The minimum is the 25 years. But like, let's say it was a hate crime, that enhancement could be what makes it
okay.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So okay, we're saying the same thing, but I guess in a different way. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Like so those enhancements is what increases the sentencing. So without those enhancements, the sentencing would possibly be less, right? So
Possibly
what
be,
I'm
yeah, depending on if there's a mandatory
so
minimum or
instead of like so instead of like 25 years, they'll get life with the enhancements, but without the enhancements, most likely you may see the 25 years, right? Due to the
right.
mandatory minimums of that particular crime. So in this case, in Gendron's case, those enhancements probably so many enhancements played a role where he had the life without the possibility of parole, even though he was a 18-year-old, even though
Right.
the age was there and all, but everything surrounding the case enhanced it to that level. So even if without those enhancements, and if there's an element of possible self-defense, he probably would have gotten a lesser charge, for example. Kyle Rittenhouse comes to mind, a person who killed people, but that was mitigated due to self-defense. What's the guy? The guy who killed Trayvon Martin. That dude.
George Zimmerman.
Zimmerman, thank you. That guy. So people come to mind, like, so other civilians, I feel like can get off. I feel like, as long as it's any type of doubt, it seems like when it comes to Black people, if there's any type of doubt, I feel like justice probably won't be served. That's the way it's leading towards. I'm hoping that this case can be a change of some new wave of, punishing people. We're starting to see people actually get convicted. So that's better than what's been happening before. But there's still a long way to go as far as making it normal. If you do this, this is going to be the consequence. So yeah, thanks for answering that, Sam. Going over
Yeah.
that. You want to add anything to
Well, yeah. I think in regards to our profession, I think that's one of the biggest things where that's going to go towards the zealousy of either the prosecutors and how they are going to attack the case, right? Like, are you going to try to go after those enhancements? Are you going to try to seek the maximum type of punishment for the behaviors that took place? And that's all dependent upon how the attorney looks to attack that case. And so, I think that and in itself kind of presents some issues, right? Because if it's say a white defendant, and then we're in a primarily white area and city, like, are they going to look at this and say, okay, well, yeah, we're gonna prosecute you, but we're not going to prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law? Or are they going to look to say, hey, we're going to try to go after you for everything that we can due to the heinous actions, due to your heinous actions? So there's factors. There's always been, other little factors that's going to play into that, which is why I feel like, take it out of their hands. And if we can get the courts, not the courts, but the Congress to kind of get us something on the books that kind of allow for, outside of whether it's a regular citizen or if it's a citizen who's sworn to protect this, not this nation, but sworn to protect their community as far as being an officer of the law, that they also have to be held to a certain standard outside of, like we said, the qualified immunity that they may normally receive. So, yeah, I definitely think that there's something where it goes towards the jealousy of the defense, or excuse me, not the defense, but the prosecution, and let's see how hard they go after having these crimes looked at, and then also the evidence that's presented that they are left with or they're provided with. You know, if there are manifestos, are there prior histories of this individual doing certain things in their past? Are there any type of things where we may see, maybe even looking at their family, did they grow up in a family that had, hatred or gang violence and things of that nature in their in their past? So those are all factors that I think should be taken into consideration when we look at the type of sentencings that mass shooters or people who are serial killers, as we stated, should receive.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what you guys said. I do think that we definitely need legislation. There has to be something put in place to protect people. And when I say that, like it's one thing to have legislation just to protect Black people, like the George Floyd bill, when you're talking about policing and things like that. But we also need something with regards to these mass shootings, because the mass shootings are out of control. They are completely out of control. We're constantly, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was one that just took place within the last couple of weeks up in Michigan. So, something has to give, because these mass shootings, aside from the fact that they're out of control, it's really sad. Every time there's a mass shooting or something like that, especially when it's Black people, it reminds me of the church bombing back in the day when they killed those little kids. I don't know why, those little girls. I don't know why it always makes me think of that, but it does. And so I think that legislation is definitely in order. And whatever that legislation contains, there has to be a hate bill aspect attached to it. There has to be that type of enhancement, because typically when you see these mass shootings, most often, not always, but most often, the target is a group of people, whether it be Black people, whether it be Jewish people or gay people, or, you know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. So, or Muslim people. I think that it's important to go ahead and add that, because people need to be thinking twice before they decide to go out and just take out a whole bunch of innocent people who are literally just living their life, going to the grocery store, going to the movies, driving down the street, minding their own business. You know what I'm saying? Going to work, going to a restaurant. Like, people should be able to go in to praise their God and worship, their higher power, whether it be at a church, a synagogue, or a mosque. People should be able to do those things. Go to going to a gay club. All of these things are happening, and they're happening a lot, and they're happening a lot more frequently than before. And Congress has to do something. I don't know what, but something. They got to figure it out. That's why they get elected.
Yeah, I agree with that, Sam. Congress, I agree, legislation needs to step up. But as far as outside of legislation, I think, the community needs to keep applying that pressure. Keep doing what you need to do, keep, protesting, keep resisting, keep fighting. As far as voting, telling what you demand for your votes, doing all kinds of strategies in order to convince politicians, legally, of course, to actually hear your needs and actually take care of your needs and take action on your needs. So I think that's a big step that people need to take it upon themselves, because things aren't going to change unless people actually make the effort or put in the work to make the change. And that's especially the boots on the ground, the front lines, all of that stuff. So that's for sure. So that's all I wanted to add as far as the community aspect. I agree with the legislation aspect that you mentioned, Sam. So I wanted to transition us into the book of the month. Once again, it's the 4-Hour Work Week, a book by Timothy Ferriss. It's a great book if you're trying to escape your 9 to 5, looking for a little bit of a side hustle to make a little extra income during these times of high inflation and a little bit of uncertainty with economies around the world. So I think that's a good book to help you get started, increase your knowledge and learning on a few things to make a little extra income. So next, I also want to discuss the Black Business of the Month, which is a fellow YouTube channel. It's called, his YouTube channel is Mamiya Obsidian, also known as Obsidian Radio. Mamiya Obsidian Ali, excuse me, and he's the author of 2 books. Since this is the month of love, we had Valentine's Day not too long ago. I decided to promote this guy's business. So he's an author or like a relationship guru. He has a book for the ladies, a book for the gentlemen as well. It's a very comprehensive book, 358 pages. He took his time to develop it. So y'all go ahead and support the brother. Y'all should see a website to the books and the links in the prompt here. And also we'll put some in the description as well. So that is the book of the Black Business. Sorry. So next is the motivational minute here. So this quote really speaks to me here because I'm trying to grow as an individual and as a person, and I think other people who are trying to increase their life, the value of their life, and just increase other people's lives, I think it would speak to them. Is he who is afraid to ask is ashamed of learning. So that goes with saying, it's a Danish proverb, and that's saying, hey, if you don't ask the questions, if you don't speak up, you won't learn, you won't grow as a person. So I think more people need to speak up so they can learn, increase their learning, ask the right questions, ask questions, just period, so you can become a better person, a better thinker, and not just go with the crowd. Ask the questions. If it's a second guess, ask it to yourself, ask to others, so you increase your learning. So that's the motivational minute for me. So that wraps us up for this podcast episode. I want to thank you for everyone for listening to us. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, turn your notifications off so you can see when we upload. We're doing What's Up Wednesday every Wednesday at 8:30. So check that out. So if you guys want us to talk about any topics or anything like that, just shoot us a DM. You can email us at counterpointspodcast@gmail.com as well. And we'll be more than willing to try to address the topic that you would like us to talk about and discuss. My co-host, do y'all have any other final words I want to say? All right, guys, thank you for listening, and we love y'all. Peace.